hajat, fulfill my this dua by the wasila of this and this buzurg, by the wasila of Imams of Ahlul Bayt, by the wasila of the Quran, by the wasila of the Prophets, right? So we generally give wasila when it comes for asking our prayers. We do the intercession to Allah as being prescribed in Quran. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وابتغوا إليه الوسيلة. That, O believers, have God fearness within you and try to get what? Try to get intercession when you are asking Allah Almighty. So here we can see that from Surah Al-Ma'idah, it is important for us to take intercession when we are asking Allah Almighty. But Ibn Taymiyyah came in and he has serious objection of the Shias or general Muslims taking saints or taking important personalities as wasila. So obviously this ideology didn't get much acceptance during that time, because during that time the people that were ruling, they were firm against Ibn Taymiyyah. Even the scholars of those times, whether it be the Maliki, whether it be the Shafi'i, they were against Ibn Taymiyyah generally, right? But what happened was that when Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, he saw the practices which he called shirk. Obviously those were not shirk. Those were just our way of showing respect. That was just our way of giving the honor to the important personalities. So when he looked at the people giving the honor to these personalities in their graves and the wasila that people would ask, then what he did was that he had an alliance with a person called Muhammad bin Saud. Remember the name, Muhammad bin Saud. So Muhammad bin Saud and Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, these two people had an alliance, and then they rampaged and attacked Muslim territories, right? So they attacked Makkah firstly. Within Makkah, there were graves of Hazrat Abu Talib, Hazrat and other personalities too, like important personalities that were being buried there. So he basically destroyed all those places. Then he went to Medina, and in Medina, he destroyed the graves of Ahlul Bayt, even the graves of some of the companions that Ahlul Sunnah revere. Then he not only was satisfied of what he did in Makkah and Medina, then he went to Karbala. And imagine there was such a huge massacre in Karbala, because a lot of residents of Karbala, especially the young men, they went for Najaf for the ziyarat, right? The history tells us, right? So when they attacked, obviously there was no resistance. They attacked Karbala, they killed the children, they killed the women, they killed the elderly people, right? And then they rampaged, and then they stole all the important belongings that were to the shrine of Imam Hussein, the shrine of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam. So you could see that this mentality of terrorism, this mentality of imposing your beliefs through using the sword, through using the different other means that are not really peaceful, were already deployed by Wahhabis at that time. So now, obviously, the last thing, what happened was that when they attacked it, when they did whatever they did, the government of that time were Uthmaniyun, right? So Uthmaniyun are the Turkish people, right? They were ruling the Islamic governance. They had Muslim lands under their control. So then they attacked, then they basically destroyed the Wahhabi ideology, not the ideology, but the people that were going against the Muslim lands. And then there was a era or time of peace around that time. But what happened was that again, they rose again. And then finally, under the leadership of probably Abdulaziz or someone, they finally had the control of the Holy Land, the Hijaz, Makkah and Medina again. And then they destroyed those places again. And then you could see like 80 years back, 90 years back, around 1930s, they did what they did. To this day, we mourn and we basically do our commemorations of the things that happened years back, because we just want to keep it within our mind that Baqi is important for us. This Baqi, the graveyard of Baqi, has a significant importance to the life of the believer. Why? Because 4 of our Imams are buried there. Fatima bint Asad salamullah alayha is buried there. Janab Maria Qibtiyya is buried there. And some other revered personality like Uthman bin Maf'un and some other personalities, they all are really respectful and respectable to the Shias. So since they are being buried there, so obviously we have this thing within our mind that we need to get the graveyard built. We need to get the tombs built, because we need to give the respect to the personalities that they deserve the way it should be. So this was a brief background of like why do we have this day of Baqi? Why do we have an anniversary of the destruction of the day of the Baqi? And inshallah, I hope that with this brief introduction, people would be more willing to go and participate in those gatherings that are specifically for the event of Baqi. And inshallah, in future classes, or inshallah, if Allah gives us time, we can go into a little bit more details and talk about what are the proofs that we have as a Shia believer. When you are talking to someone who doesn't believe in these graves, who doesn't believe in these tombs, who doesn't believe in the shrines, and if he says everything is a practice of shirk, how would we reply to those people, right? This is a topic that we need to cover, inshallah, in some other classes. But sufficient for us to understand, and this is an important proof that you guys can keep in your mind, that if you're talking to someone who is really critical of our belief regarding visiting the shrines, visiting the graves, one of the important proof that we can use is Khane Kaaba, Masjid al-Haram itself. Now, how would that be a proof? So when you go to Masjid al-Haram, you take a round between the Kaaba, right? And when you're taking rounds between the Kaaba, so you try to do that in a way that the Hijr Ismail, people that have been to Masjid al-Haram, to the Kaaba, there's a specific place which is called Hijr of Ismail, the lapse of Prophet Ismail alayhi salatu wassalam. What does it mean? It means simply that that's the place where Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wassalam is buried. Imagine Hazrat Ismail being buried right at the center of Masjid al-Haram, like few meters away from Kaaba. Hazrat Ismail is being buried there. And not only Hazrat Ismail, some of the reports say that there are so many prophets that are buried around that area. So if visiting the graves is haram, then why Allah is encouraging us to go and do the Hajj while He knows that there are so many graves there? Even if there's not so many graves there, we are sure that there is a grave of Hazrat Ismail present there, right? So this is a proof that we can use. You can say that if this is a methodology that you want to deploy and you want to say everything as shirk, what would you say about Hijr of Ismail, the grave of Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam? Who was Hazrat Ismail? Hazrat Ismail is the great grandfather of Prophet, of Imam Ali, of all the Imams we have, right? All of their forefathers, it traces back where? To Hazrat Ismail. And Hazrat Ismail is the son of whom? Hazrat Ibrahim. Now, Hazrat Ismail is being respected by both Shias, by both Sunnis, by Muslims, by Christians, by Jews, by everyone. He's a respectful personality for all of us, right? So for all what we call it, Deen Ibrahimi, Abrahamic religions, right? All of them, they respect Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wassalam, right? So all of them have the consensus here that visiting graves is something which is allowed. It was done even by the Prophet when he would visit the graveyard of Baqi. It was done by the people that came after that. It was done by the Nabi Zahra salamullah alayha, where she would visit the graves of the martyrs of Uhud. So all these things combined, we can just get a really good understanding that visiting the graves itself and taking the tabarruk from it is something which is allowed by Prophet. It's something which is allowed by the Imams. It's something which is being prescribed by Allah Almighty. And if there would have been an objection to this practice, then surely Allah would have revealed something in Quran about prohibiting visiting of the graves and taking the barakah. So this is some of the basic things that we need to keep in our mind. And inshallah, when you go back and reflect upon it, I would surely want you to remember these things and make important notes of the things that I'm saying. Sometimes it's difficult when the class is happening, so you can just revisit the lecture again and try to take all the important notes that you think are important to take, right? So once you have taken the notes, it's easier for you to talk to anyone that has some sort of valala or sometimes some sort of like misguidance within his belief, and someone who is criticizing our belief of taking the barakah or taking the shifa or taking or visiting the graves. So this is all for the initial part of the lecture, and today inshallah we would continue with the nijasa part, the nijasa al-tahara that we were going through. Now some of our people that might have joined it for the first time, they can go through the lectures. If you If I can request Sister Afshaf, she can put the lecture, the first lecture that we gave about the Nijasat part. Please, if she can just put that lecture link, so some people that might have joined us today, for them, it will be a little bit easier to go back and think about it. Now, one thing you guys can do and help me with, it's when it's already 11:45-ish, just pause me there because I'm going to start the lecture now. I don't have the I don't have the time frame right now in front of me and the clock, so you just can update me as soon as the clock hits 11:45. So the Nijasa thing that we were discussing about, Nijasa is important, right? And here we have there were several reasons that I kept aside the Shia. One of the reasons is that there are so many books that are only talking about the Tahara. See, this is talking about the Tahara, the first volume, and then we have the second volume also talking about the Tahara, right? And now the third volume, this is also talking about the Tahara. So you can imagine like how important the purity or the intrinsic purity is for the Muslims or for the believers, that the scholars have written so many books just collecting the hadith, not even discussion on it. Then what are the discussions that are pertinent to it? Only collecting the hadith is an important thing about the chapter of the Tahara. Now, how important would it be for a Muslim to keep all the rulings in our mind? That if our scholars would only collect the hadiths that are relevant to this topic. And this is something that you are doing every day. When you go to washroom, you're going to washroom like 8 times a day, 7 times a day, 6 times a day, depends, right? But eventually we're going to the washroom. We need to know the rulings, and what are the rulings when we go to the washroom? What are the things that are impure? And if we get impure, how do we purify ourselves, right? What is the ruling if we are not sure if something is impure or not? All these things we need to have a firm understanding. Like, I understand if you don't know the rules about talaq. I understand if you don't know the rules about nikah. I understand if you don't know the rules about waqf, right? Because why? Because sometimes they're not really relevant to our life. Even though some of it, part of it might be, but a lot of it is not relevant to our life, right? I understand if you don't have the basic understanding for that, but I would not overlook if you don't know basics about Shara, if you don't know basic about Tahara, if you don't know basic about fasting. Why? Because we are practically applying it throughout our life, a major part of the year, or sometimes every day, or sometimes even like quite a few times in a day. So important, again, I say it is important for us to have this understanding of what are the najis things and what are the tahir things, how does it thing become najis, and what are the other rulings, right? I'm not really sure where did we actually ended our lecture, but we discussed about the 10 important things that are najis. So there are different ways that you can prove the najasat of the thing. I will start from here, inshallah. So in case if I have covered part of it, it will be a recap. And if it wasn't being covered, so inshallah, this will be a new thing that you will be learning today. Ways that you would prove najasat, right? So najasat can only be proved through several ways. Everything on this earth, on this planet, is tahir, is pak, unless or until it is proven najis. It's a general rule that you have to keep in your mind. If you're visiting a place, let's suppose you go to Wonderland, and in Wonderland you see liquid on the floor. Now, what would be your understanding? Would you take that liquid as najis, or would you take that liquid as pak, right? So basic rule says what? Everything is pak, everything is tahir, unless or until it is proven najis. So that liquid, even if it comes on your clothes, even if it comes on your body, the liquid will be considered as pak, as tahir. So you don't need to worry about it. And that solves so many problems in our life. Because so many times we are going to the places where we might think there would be something najis on it, but if we are unsure, then we would only take things as pak, as tahir. So the first way that you would prove a najasa that something is najis or not is your own certainty, your own convinced, whether you've been convinced or not. That's the first way that you would take something as najis. Let's suppose you have seen from your eyes that something is being najis. Let's suppose you were walking around and you see someone peeing on the main way, right? So now you are pretty much sure you saw someone doing that. So that automatically, whatever the liquid is on the ground would be najis. Or you see someone throwing playing around, and then you see someone being hit by a stone or being hit by something, and the blood gushes out from his body. So now, since you have seen the blood coming out and you see the blood going on the floor, so now the red liquid that you see on the floor would be najis. This is what? This is called your own certainty. That's the first way that you would prove. Now, when I say you have to be certain, it automatically means that if you're doubtful, that thing would not be najis. Let's suppose you think that it might be blood. You think it might be urine. You think it might be some other najasa, but you're not sure. So since you are not sure about something, you would take that as tahir. That's first thing. Second way that you would prove a najasa is that there are two people that are adil. Like imagine two Maulana Sahibs that you think are adil and they haven't, and you think they are to be trusted upon. If they give you gawahi, that if they are testifying that something is najis, then at that moment that thing would be taken as najis. Third way that the najasa is proven is from a reliable person. And someone might not be adil, might not be just person, right? So if he's not a just person, if he's not adil, still that thing can be proven najis. How? If you trust someone, let's suppose if I have a baby, if I have a child, right, and his age is 6 years, 7 years, but he has a basic understanding of what things are what, right? And if he tells Baba that, see, this thing was, I see someone, urinating here, or I see someone that their blood was mixed with the water which is present here, right? And if you trust the child there, right, even though he's a 6, 7 years old, even though the question of him being adil or not adil doesn't come up, but if you trust that person, or if you trust anyone else, right, your mother, your father, all of these people are trustworthy, right? Your friends, if you trust them and if you trust whatever they are saying, and if they say and if they testify something it's najis, that thing would be najis too. Now, a general question comes in whether you are unsure something is najis or not. So there are two ways that you would handle this masala, right? This is a thing, let's suppose this is a pen, I'm not sure whether it's najis or not. Sometimes I have misunderstanding, or sometimes I don't know the answer of the question itself. Imagine the blood. I don't know whether the blood itself is najis or not. Just try to follow me. Sometimes I don't know the ruling of something. So in that way, I need to prevent myself from it, and I need to know the ruling, what are the things that are najis, right? Let's suppose there's blood. I don't know whether it's najis or not. So at that way, I need to prevent myself. Imagine if you have not gone through the rulings, and if you see a liquid that looks red, and it's a blood someone says you, and you're not sure whether blood is najis or not, you would prevent yourself from it, right? That's one thing. Why? Because you don't know the ruling of the stuff that is in front of you. In that way, we have to prevent ourselves. So for that, if you learn the ruling, and if we know there are only 10 nijasats on this planet, urine, feces, semen, and all those things that go around, only those things are najis. Other things that are present in this world are not. Once we know the rulings, and then we doubt whether this something is urine or not, whether this something is blood or not, whether this something is dropping of the mouth or not, whether this something is the feces or not, right? If we have doubt regarding it being something or not, right, then at that moment we would consider this as pak, as tahir. Do you get my point? Please try to follow me here. Once you have a problem, once you have the question and doubt with your mind about the ruling of something, in that way you have to research more. But if you have the doubt regarding something being the najis thing or not, then you don't have to do any research. You just have to think that thing is not najis and it is pak. Right? I took the example of blood. But mashallah, you guys, mashallah, you're going through this class and you know what things are najis or not. The only doubt that you would come across in your practical time, or when you are exposed to things practically, would be whether this thing is blood or not, whether this thing is feces or not, whether this thing is semen or not, whether this thing is urine or not. All these things might just come into your mind, right? You see liquid somewhere and you're thinking, oh, whether it might be najis or not, whether it might be mixed with something which is najis or not. In that way, you have to think that as pak, as tahir, as we have talked about. And now, the other thing that we have to keep in our mind is that how a clean thing actually becomes najis. So here we have actually talked about things that would prove that it is najis or not, right? Are we on the same path? Are we clear on this, right? Look, brothers, if you have any questions and if it becomes really difficult for you to understand what I'm trying to explain, please stop me at that moment sometimes, right? Because it is important for me to go with the flow of the class, right? One masala is dependent on the other. So if that first masala is not clear sometimes all the masalas or all the problems that I'm going to tell you, you might not understand, right? So if you have a problem in understanding something, please speak up, right? You don't have to fear. Only I'm here, Sister Afsha is here, and Iftikhar Bhai is here. Only 3 adults are here. Otherwise, all of us are kids here, right? So don't be shy when you're asking a question. Please. How a clean thing become najis? Imagine the span is clean, right? How would it get najis, right? First way is the transmission of wetness. Important masala, right? Imagine my hand, it got najis because of blood, right? Now, my hand is wet right now. And if my wet hand touches something else like this dry pen, and if my wetness of the hand, it transmits and it basically goes from my hand to this pen, then this pen would become najis. Please try to understand this point, important thing. When the wetness of one object, najis object, goes onto a clean object, then only things become najis, right? What is the other example? Imagine my hands are najis, right? But they are dry right now. This pen is wet, right? And if this wet pen touches this dry hand in a way that the wetness of this dry pen goes onto the dry hand that I have, then this pen would become najis too, right? So the ruling is what? The things will only get najis if the wetness between the two transmits from one object, from one body to another. Sorry. So if there is no transmission of wetness, then the things won't be najis. Please try to understand and follow this point. It is important, right? What does it mean? Imagine if my hands are not wet, they are dry. If the pen is dry too. If they both touches, then this pen would not get najis. Why? Because the transmission of wetness has not taken place. The transmission of wetness should take place too. So a lot of times you will have the questions, Maulana Saab, Agha, what about a dog? A dog is najis, right? What about the dog touching my body, and trying to scrape his body from my body? Would that make me najis or not? My immediate answer to you would be that if dog was wet, right? And if it has touched your body and the wetness of that dog has been transmitted to your body, then only it's najis. Or your body was wet and you touched the body of the dog, then only your body was najis. But let's suppose both of your body and his body or her body was dry, and then the contact took place. In that moment, that thing would not be considered as najis. Please try to understand this, because this will make our masla and life so easy, right? That's why imagine sometimes you don't have the water, and if you go to washroom, I would recommend to you that still the washroom or the urine that we have passed, right? That thing has not become tahir right now. Yeah, this is understandable. But I would still recommend to you all, just don't leave your private parts like this, right? Try to dry it up through a tissue paper or through something, right? Through Kleenex or something. So once you have made it dry, then once you come back to the home, then you can do the tahara. Look, what benefits, what it does? The benefit of what it does is that our private parts or our body, part of the body, would still be najis. But again, that najasa would not be going to my clothes, would not be going to my undergarments, would not be going to my body, right? Why? Because that thing is what? Dry. Yani sukhi hui hai. If that thing is dry, if that thing is sukhi hui, then it would not go, and the najasa would not go from one body to another. That solves so many problems in our life, right? Imagine if something is najis, the carpet is najis. You don't have to make it tahir. Why? Because the thing is only dry. Even if you put your dry, even if you're walking there with your dry feet, right? You don't have to worry about it, right? You don't have to make things clean. But if you walking on it through your wet feet would always make your feet najis, then only you would go and try to park it. Why? Because obviously your contact is flawed and you need to make your life easy. So transmission of wetness is an important thing, right? Likewise, there's a difference between, inshallah, I think this will be a little bit more detailed, and we just have to be a little bit mindful of the time too. But one thing you can keep in your mind is that there's a difference between solid and liquid things, right? In terms of the najasa. What does that mean, Maulana? Right? It's a question that might come up. If something is solid like pen is a solid object, right? If part of it becomes najis, then only that part of it would be considered as najis. Important ruling. Wallahi ladeen, I have heard so many people asking it. They were asking, Maulana Sahab, we were sleeping on the bed and something got najis, our chadar or our blanket or something that we were taking us, right? So that thing got najis. What's the ruling on it? Now they think that if part of the blanket got najis, or if part of our shirt got najis, or if part of our pants got najis, then we have to wash the whole pants. We have to wash the whole shirt. We have to wash the whole blanket. The ruling is not like this. The ruling says that if you have a solid object, if part of it becomes najis, then only that part would have to be purified, not the whole thing. Makes our life so easy. Imagine our blanket getting najis. You think like how much time would it take to purify the blanket? That would be a huge exercise to do it. Or if your pants got najis, a part of it got najis, right? Would you think like how much time would it take for you to just purify that huge pant, the huge jeans pant that you have, right? So in that way, the easier thing is that just to wash the part, the relevant part that got najis. That's it. Your whole thing is fine. Your whole thing is okay. You can pray with that pant, or you can pray with that t-shirt. You can pray with that jacket, whatever got tahir. And once you have purified that relevant portion that got najis, right? So imagine if the cap of this pant got najis, I would only clean this cap, not the whole pant that I have to clean it, right? So this is for those solid objects. And generally, when we are dealing in our lives, we are dealing with solid objects, right? Imagine our pants, our shirts, our body. Imagine if someone's body got najis. Sometimes they have this misunderstanding that they have to take the whole shower. No, they don't have to take the whole shower. They have to just wash that relevant part of the body that got najis. Imagine their thighs got najis. They just have to wash the thigh. If their imagine hand got najis, they just have to wash the hands. They don't have to wash the whole body, right? That's one thing. Second thing are the fluid, right? The liquid things that we have. The rulings for the liquid is that if the liquid is of a kind that when you remove the wetness from one part, it doesn't remain unwet and the other wetness is followed. Let's suppose you have water. I think it will be a little bit difficult for me to explain like this. If I would have a practical example, I could have shown it. But let's suppose water, let's suppose sharbat, let's suppose cold drink, let's suppose all these kind of things, let's suppose the food that you're making, the shorba you have, right? Even if the smallest part of it gets najis, the whole thing gets najis itself. Whole thing gets najis. Important for us to be really, especially when we're cooking, right? For our respectful sisters and elders that are cooking, sometimes they are putting on the stuff and God forbid, like they have a cut on their finger. And if even a smallest drop of a blood goes into the food, the whole food gets najis, right? So when it gets najis, there's a specific ruling how we make it pak or not. That's another topic for another day. But at least the whole shorba, at least the whole syrup that you're making in that utensil, the whole shorba will get najis, the whole utensil will be najis, and we have to make it all over again, right? That's the simplest way I can explain you. Obviously, there are some different parts. Imagine if it has meat in it, then you can wash it up. That's a different thing for different time, right? Inshallah, I'm not going to go into that much detail. But sufficient for us to know that solid things, if they get najis, you just have to wash the relevant part. If the liquid thing gets najis, then we don't have any other option but to throw that liquid away, because a part of the liquid, the smallest part of it, would mean the huge part of it is najis too. So imagine that when you go to the sabils and when you see the huge utensil, and when you see the sharbat, someone making sharbat on it, and God forbid, even if the minutest part of the nijasa would go into it, that will make whole utensil and the whole sharbat is najis. We cannot just take the blood out of the relevant part and think everything is part. No. With liquid, everything will get najis. So now there are some rulings regarding the nijasa. Important for us to keep in our mind. We have to be really, really mindful of if some things get najis. We have to immediately clean it, immediately make it part. And making those things najis itself is haram too, right? First thing is Quran. Making Quran najis is completely haram. Even the letters, even the ink of the Quran, even the top, the cover letter, the cover top, the title page, even though it might not contain the letters of the Quran, but since it would be considered as the body of the Quran, so making any part of or any body of the Quran najis is haram. It's completely haram. Imagine, God forbid, if you start bleeding and you're reading the Quran, and if part of the blood goes onto the Quran, we have to clean that. And how do we clean that? It's not just cleaning it with the tissue. No. First, we have to clean it with the tissue. Inshallah, I'm going to talk about more once we go into the Tahara part. I'm going to go explain a little bit more of how you can make najis thing back, right? But sufficient for us to understand and know is that if part of it, even if minutest part of the Quran or the body of the Quran, it gets najis, it is haram. And God forbid, if it happens, we have to purify it immediately. Likewise, placing the Quran on najis al-ayn is haram too. Najis al-ayn is what? Imagine, God forbid, if someone, astaghfirullah, I even don't want to use the example of it, right? But let's suppose someone is disrespecting the Quran and is placing it on a dog or placing on swine, right? This is haram, not even normal haram. It's a huge haram. It's disrespecting the book of Allah. And God forbid, if someone does it, even if he would remain a Muslim or not, is a different question, right? But how this masla is relevant to us. This masla is really relevant to us is when, imagine, God forbid, if you have a small mushaf with you, right? And if that mushaf by mistake goes into the toilet, right? Goes into the WC, if someone is using WCs, goes into the commode, right? It goes into the main portion where you are doing whatever you're doing, right? And if it goes into it and someone flushes it around, or someone has, like, if you see the Quran right in the toilet, right? Then at that moment, you have to take the Quran out and you have to wash it immediately, right? This is the masla which is right. Kabhi kabhi ho jata. Imagine you have a verse of the Quran with you, and God forbid, you have written on the paper, and God forbid, that paper goes into the washroom, to the toilet. And now the toilet seat down under the water, you can see the paper of the Quran there. Then at that moment, first thing you need to do is take out that paper and clean it properly, right? So this masla is relevant to us. Likewise, writing the Quran with najis ink is haram too. Imagine it just pen, the ink of it gets najis. Maybe I'm using najis ink intrinsically, or maybe this ink or the head of the pen, you know, the place where I write from, it touches a najis body. So whatever I would be writing would be najis, of course, right? So at that moment, the whole thing, if I'm writing it, the Quran with it, this is not allowed to write it with najis ink. Likewise, writing the names of Allah, writing the names of the Ma'asumeen alayhimus salam, same rulings applies for the name of Allah, just like the rulings we have with the Quran. Same things apply with the name of Ma'asumeen alayhimus salam. Same ruling applies for the blessed clay or the blessed sand of Karbala, the Khak Shifa. If the blessed Khak Shifa is being, thrown into the lavatory, is thrown into the toilet, even by mistake, right? Then still we should not use the washroom. We should take out you should do our best to take out the khak as best as we can. Inshallah, different rulings. But imagine if a part of it just goes into it, then we can never use that washroom. Why? Because khak shifa has gone into it, right? So this just gives us one understanding, which is whenever we go to the washroom, we should take away all the important belongings that we have. Like imagine this angooty that I have right now. It has written the name of Allah is written on it, right? The name of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam is on this stone, the stone that you see in this ring. But imagine, God forbid, if it goes into lavatory, it goes into the toilet, right? Then I have to take this booty out or this stone out really quickly. Because if I would not do it, then it would be a disrespectful thing. It would be a disrespect to this stone. So just keep in your mind that when you are going through the problems, that the najasa we have to be really mindful of the way we treat it, and the mindful of the important things that we have, the blessed things that we have. I should, whenever you go to the washroom, take all the belongings off, right? Just don't have anything which is blessed. Don't have anything which is respectful. Even if you have a ring like this, take the ring out before you go to the washroom. Or put it somewhere else, safe, maybe in your pocket, maybe somewhere else where you know that it would not go to the lavatory, right? So just keep these things in your mind, and this ends our masalas, or the masais for today. One thing that people might have in their mind is the masala of butter. Butter, is that a solid thing or is that a liquid thing? Likewise, the masala of ghee, like the butter that we use to cook food. जो घी में हम लोग खाने बनाते हैं. So sometimes if the part of the ghee, it gets najis, what is the ruling for that? Would ghee be considered as liquid? Would that be considered as solid? Because some of the stuff, you see the density or the fluidity of it is really, really thick. If the fluidity of a liquid is really thick, or let's suppose we have any other example we can take, right? So the ruling that the Masjid says is that if the fluid or if the liquid is really, really thick, right? In that way, if a portion of it gets najis, please try to follow me here, important masala. If a portion of it gets najis, and if you take that portion out, and that empty place that you have taken out, let's suppose this whole thing has ghee on it. And let's suppose from this part, the really basic part, the gray area that you see, this got najis. Now I take the whole gray area out, right? If taking the gray area out, because this was najis, I take this ghee out, this amount of ghee or the butter out. As soon as I take out, there's an empty spot there. There's an empty space here. If that empty space is not filled immediately, देखिए तवज्जो है, अगर एकदम से ये खाली जगह पूर्ण नहीं होती है, it takes like 5-10 minutes for this empty space to be filled, then at that moment that would be considered as solid. Please try to follow. So in that way, if the ghee gets najis, right, and if you take the part of the ghee out, right, the rest of the portion would still be pak, would still be tahir. Why? Because even though it's a fluid, even though it's a liquid, but it's a really, really thick liquid. And the ruling for the thick liquid is that if you take a portion of it out, and if the space remains empty for 2 minutes, for 3 minutes, for 5 minutes, even then it can, liquid can go to that empty space. That's a different ruling. But if you take the portion out and the space remains for a few minutes, then at that moment, that thing would be considered as what? It would be considered as part of the solid things. So we have already discussed about the solid things. That if solid things becomes najis, you just have to clean that portion. Imagine you're eating banana, another masala. A part of it, like suppose blood comes out from your mouth and it sticks to the top part of the banana. Does it mean that I have to throw the whole banana out? No, I even don't have to throw the front portion out too. I can just go and rinse it and put it under the tap, and the tap water would just clean it, and then I can eat it later, right? But even if someone wants to do a lot of ihtiyat, they can just cut the top portion of the banana out, and the rest of the banana would still be tahir, would still be okay to eat, okay to use, right? Likewise, this is the masla with the ghee, this is the masla with the butter. Let's suppose we have a huge chunk of butter. Part of it got najis, then we should just take that specific part out, and the rest of the butter will still be considered as tahir. So I think, what's the time right now? If someone can help me with it.
Yeah, it's 11:50.
11:50, yeah. So inshallah, we can start with the questions. And I really want every one of you to please ask questions, right? Because we're putting efforts, and the efforts for this, and these efforts are for you to understand and also to basically question as much as you can. So whatever questions you have, please ask the questions now. Yeah, go ahead, brother. Go ahead. Turn off your mic. Yeah, turn on your mic, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. How are you doing?
Yep. So I had a question that you said that there are 10 najasat like in this world. So what are the 10 najasat?
Thank you so much, brother Mohsen. If you go through my old lecture, inshallah, if Sister Afsha or brother Iftikhar can share the link, even if they don't share the link, they'll share it on the with you guys later. We already discussed about part of the najasat, a huge part of it last time, and we discussed that it includes feces, it includes urine, it includes semen, it includes blood, it includes dogs, swine, and all these are part of the najasat, right? So we discussed that in detail, and inshallah, Sister Afsha would give you the link. I think she has messaged you. So go through that lecture. Everyone go through that lecture, because that lecture is really relevant. It's really connected to this lecture. If someone has not taken that lecture, then it will be difficult for them to understand. The problem was that we started this lecture before Ramadan, so obviously the people that join after it, they wouldn't have the access. But inshallah, once you go through that, you will have more details. And the book that we are using right now is the book of Ayatollah Sistani, the Islamic Laws. So if you go through his website, you can download that. And inshallah, I would just say, whatever lecture you're coming across, try to have books with you too. So one book, I wouldn't say books, so that whatever you are listening from the lecturer, you can just go and read it in the book too. Next question. Any other question? Anything? I mean, this was an important topic. It concerns our life, everyday life. Please ask.
I have a question. So basically, whenever I go to play football or sports, and then sometimes when it rains, or like when you get in contact with like Indians and Hindus and Sikhs, do you get najis?
Yeah, a wonderful question. So let's suppose it's raining and you're getting in contact with those people that are considered as intrinsically najis. Let's suppose Sikhs, let's suppose Hindus, right? What is the masala if we get in contact with them? So brother, the important masala is that unless until you are unsure whether part of your body has touched their body, right? Or whether their body has touched your clothes, right? Then just their pants being wet, just their shirt being wet, doesn't mean that the shirt is najis. That doesn't mean that their pants are najis, or if their shoes are wet. And if they come to your courtyard, or if they come to your place, and if they come with that wet shoes, right? That doesn't mean that the shoes are najis, right? So we have to distinguish between the body, like the intrinsic body of the person, and the things that he is wearing. Unless or until we are sure that, the wetness of his shirt is touching his body, and then it touches your body, or then it touches your clothes, then only it would be najis. But just their intrinsic stuff that they're wearing, and if it gets wet, that doesn't mean that if it touches you, automatically it will be, you would get najis, right? So try to make your life as easy as you can, because the masla, the nijas, and the tahara is such that even if you would entertain the smallest doubt, you would think, oh, it's nothing. But even if you would entertain the smallest doubt, then it would just go from smaller to bigger, and then time would come in, then you would be doubting everything. Like I've seen people, so I would just recommend you to kill the thing right before it begins, right? So don't worry about it. If their clothes, if their shirts, if their pants, if their shoes are touching your, if they are wet, if they're touching your body or your clothes, then it's fine. But unless until their hands are wet and then it touches your body or touches your clothes, then only you have to be mindful and you have to clean that relevant portion.
Yeah,
Any
I
other
also
question?
I have
Yeah.
another question.
Go ahead.
So-
What's the question?
What is the ruling about when in public when you take your backpack and maybe has like a small Quran, or your mobile has a Quran that, like, and you take it into the washroom?
No. So when we talk about Quran, it doesn't mean the digital Quran we have in our cell phones, right? Because the digital Qurans that we have in our cell phones are not Quran itself. They're not.
What about the little Quran?
Yeah, so if we have the original Quran, let's suppose we have a small book that contains the verses of Quran, or we have the Quran itself, then taking that in the washroom, just turn off the mic, everyone turn off the mic, yeah. Just taking the Quran itself is not a problem of itself, right? Like, let's suppose if I have a Quran in my pocket, this front pocket, I have this small Quran with me. Just taking it in the washroom itself is not a problem. Fiqhan, like you can take it in the washroom, right? But we just have to be mindful. That's the whole thing, right? We have to be mindful that this Quran being with me is not a source of disrespect for it. Let's suppose if I have a Quran and if I have put it somewhere in lavatory, somewhere where I feel it's being disrespected, irrespective if it becomes najis or not, then obviously the ruling becomes different, right? But if, let's suppose, it is on your top pocket, right? And you know it is close to your heart, it's not being disrespected, and you can just, when you sit, you can just keep a hand like this, then it should be fine. The only problem comes in when it actually falls, God forbid, into the toilet, in the toilet seat, right? Then there's a problem. What was your question, Mohsin? You were asking? Raza, you were asking a question?
Yeah, so I had another question, and my question was that a kafir is haram, right? Kafir.
No, not all kafirs are najis. Only.
Yeah. So kafirs are najis, right?
Yeah, Christians or Jews are fine. They're not najis. The non-kitabis they are problematic. So let's suppose Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, atheists, all of these. For them, we would have to be mindful. But again, I'm saying, like, if you're unsure, don't entertain your doubts. Never entertain your doubts. That's just like, because see that I know where you guys are coming from. Like, let's suppose I'm working in a workplace where we have different people. Jazakallah, Iftikhar Bhai, thank you so much. Iftikhar Bhai has given a link. Please, everyone, just copy the link and save it for you, so that inshallah you can go through the lecture. See, the thing is that I'm working at a workplace where we have Sikhs, where we have Christians, where we have different kinds of people from different faiths working there. So now when I go to you and use the utensils, I'm just like a little bit mindful. I wash it one time just to be for peace of my mind. But see, the thing is that we don't have to entertain the doubts when it comes in. If you're unsure whether this knife is najis or not, just use that knife. You don't have to investigate. You don't have to ask the people, oh, was this knife used for this purpose, for that purpose? No. And it solves so many problems. So let's suppose you go into Tim Hortons, and if you see that there is someone who is non-Muslim is making drink for you, right? So now you don't have to doubt a lot. You don't even have to see if she has used her hand, if she has used her hand in a way that, it became najis or not. You just have to use your cell phone. You do whatever you want to do. And when drink comes in, just have that drink. Otherwise, if you would investigate a lot and if you would think, oh, this thing was made the right way or not, practically your life would be impractical here in Canada. You cannot sustain here, I'm telling you right now. So again, the most important masla that all the marajahs, not only Atullah Society, every marjah has this masla. You should never entertain your doubt. Again, never entertain your doubt. If you're in a doubt, think as if the things is najis, things are bak. And second important ruling is you don't have to investigate further. Any other question?
Yes, brother. One more question, just one more.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So,
Okay, if somebody is coming in our house, like small kids, suppose we have a home daycare, and they are coming in our house and they are Hindus. So what is the ruling about them? We are cleaning their toilet, we are keeping them in our house. Will our house get najis or we will get najis?
It's a wonderful question. So the general ruling, sister, you have to keep in your mind is that the non-baligh, right? The people, the children that are not baligh, their madhab or their religion is same as of their father, right? That's the general ruling, right? So if the kids are coming, they would have the same ruling as the adults would have, same ruling. Like जिस तरीके से एक हिंदू मर्द की होगी उसी तरीके से उसके बच्चे की भी वही ruling होगी. The only thing I would say is that it's not as difficult as we think, right? You can clean them, you can do whatever you can, it's fine, unless until you wash your hand at the end. That's it, right? Or if you're doing it, you can just have a different garment, different garb, right? When you are trying to serve them. And when the time of the namaz actually comes in, you change the garment. So that garment will only be for the workplace, right? So you can use one garment for the workplace and the other garment for your namaz and for the stuff that you do that requires the clean clothes, right? And the other things that you're doing, cleaning them and doing whatever you are doing, obviously the rules of the najasa would apply there, but it is not as difficult to follow, right? Because sometimes you're using the plates, even if you're using plates that that the small kid is using, you can just place that plate separately and wash it separately, right? Or you can, if it's a plastic plate, then you don't even have to worry. You can just throw that in the garbage, right? So there are different ways. If you go and ask each and every masala, inshallah, we can go through each and every situation and we can come up with a solution which is really easier and relevant to you. And that would not make your life a little bit difficult. But yes, if you have touched his body with a wet hand, you don't have to clean it immediately. You just have to clean it. Let's suppose if you have to serve the food, you have to clean it. Let's suppose if you're doing wudu. One answer that I want to give here for my brothers and sisters, that if something gets najis, we don't have to clean it immediately, please. Or sometimes we don't even have to clean it throughout our life, right? The things that we have to clean are only if we're using that thing for our prayer purpose, or if we would be using, let's suppose, for our food purposes, right? Only those things need to be clean, right? So let's suppose if I have this jubba, the jasha that I'm wearing, it becomes najis. I don't even have to clean it throughout my life if I'm not using it for my prayer purposes, if I'm not using for, let's suppose, things that I need to have the clean clothes for, right? But let's suppose if I'm using it for my prayer purposes, right? Then for only that purpose, I can just clean it, right? So one thing that let's suppose when I'm going and using the lavatory in my workplace, I'm pretty sure that non-Muslims are using it. Does it mean that I have to clean it? No, of course not, because it's not really concerning when it comes to my daily prayers and when it comes to the food and things that require tahara. So I hope it answers your question a little bit, but obviously your question is a little bit general. So we can go through specific situations, inshallah, later after we're done with this lecture, inshallah.
I know, brother, the time is up. Just one question, maybe that would be helpful for the young kids as well. What
Yes.
about what is the ruling regarding like when they go to the barber shop and we are like we're not on the doubt side, but most probably here in North America, if we know that they're not believers, and of course when they're touching your hairs, they're wet also. So what is the ruling regarding for that?
It's a really relevant question, sister. And my understanding is that generally when I go to barber, it's a public place, then again, the ruling will still apply. If you're in doubt, don't entertain your doubt, right? That's just a general ruling, right? If you are thinking that, oh, the water he is sprinkling on my hair, whether this water is najis or not, don't worry, take it as tahir. Do you have to investigate which madhab he's following or not? You don't have to investigate. Like, this is really, really theory thing that I'm telling you. I'm not telling something which is really practical. I know we would still have doubts in our mind, but theoretically, these all doubts, you have to think they all are pak, they all are tahir. That's just theoretical way of understanding it. Practically, what I do when I go to public place and when I go to public barber, then when I come back, I just take a shower, and I don't have to take the shower of my whole body, just like the top part where he did the cutting, right? And that too, I'm doing as a matter of precaution, just for my own conviction, right? Not because the Sharia has asked me to do so. But imagine if you are 100% sure that the barber who's cutting your hair is a kafir who is najis.
Mhm.
and he sprinkles water on your hair, right? That still doesn't make it najis. But if he practically takes your wet hair and if he holds it with his hand, then only that part of the body or that hair would become najis. Please try to understand and follow me. Only then you have to have the conviction that this barber is kafir,
Mhm.
and you have to have the 100% conviction that he has touched with his body, right? With his wet hands or your wet hair, he touched it in a way that, that wetness has transmitted from one body to another. All these check marks have to be done 100%, 100%, 100%. Then only you would pronounce your hair as najis. Otherwise, if you are a little bit unsure in one of these instances, that thing would theoretically be considered as tahir, as Baqar.
And
Right.
same ruling will go for even for the, it's not relevant to you, but for females, like if they're non-believers and you are going to some beautician and they're touching our, body and everything,
Yeah.
same ruling will apply.
Yeah, I think the same ruling will goes there too. I mean, like sometimes, look, I live in a city which I know major part of it is non-Muslims, the najis non-Muslims, right?
Mhm.
Maybe someone who's living, let's suppose, in a different area where they have non-Muslims that are tahir like Christians, then it makes it a little bit easier. But I'm living in a city where almost every other guy that you see is non-believer and a najis non-believer, right?
Mhm.
So in that way, I have to be a little bit careful. I would still be careful for my own conviction. See, sister, when I come back and when I have a haircut, I take a shower and then I do the wudu. Just for my own, sometimes you just have to make your own heart convinced, right? Just for my own conviction. But Sharia has not prescribed me to do all these things and I'm doing it. Let's suppose if the time of the namaz is running and if I came from a barber shop, then going to take a shower is haram. At that moment, I have to pray quickly. Why? Because I'm unsure whether I was najis or not. I have to do wudu quickly and pray my namaz first, right? This masla becomes relevant in those places. And same goes for our sisters too, who probably would go to beauty parlors or places where some non-Muslims, najis non-Muslims are working. Then same masla applies there too. And you just have to be sure in almost everything, sister. You have to be firstly sure that this non-Muslim. Firstly, she's non-Muslim. You don't even have to investigate it. Let's suppose it is proven her name is, let's suppose, Parminder or something like this. Next question would be that she touches your body with wetness. Her body is wet, she touches your body, or your body was wet and she touches it. Unless until you don't have the conviction for these two things, your body doesn't get this, inshallah.
Jazakallah, brother. Jazakallah.
Any other question? I don't mind answering any other questions. Anyone having any question, because this topic is really, really important for all of us. Any questions anyone has?
Boys, do you have any question? And if in future also, as brother said, this is a very important topic for us to learn about. And I know there are many questions that can come into your mind later also. So please do ask. It's a golden opportunity that brother Jarry is here and he's catering all our questions.
You know what, Sister Afsha, we can do one thing. If our brothers and sisters are a little bit, they feel shy to ask questions openly, they can send it to you personally. And inshallah, before we start the next class of it, you can probably ask those questions first so that their questions are answered. And then inshallah, we would be probably looking into our own important lecture that we will be giving. So please ask Sister Afsha personally if you don't feel, or ask me personally if one of the brother wants me to ask. My number is with Sister Afsha with Iftihar. You can get the number and you can ask me personally any question. Because I feel it is very important for you to know the masla of Nijasa Tahara completely, like inclusively. Each and every masla you should know. Because this is so much relevant to our daily life. Please.
I will post your number in the group. If the students would like to ask any question, they're more than welcome. Jazakallah, brother.
Jazakallah, sister. Inshallah, we can finish the lecture with Dua Imam Zamana, please.
Everyone.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. اللهم كن لوليك
الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا حافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا معينا حتى تسكنه أرضك عتوا وتمتعه فيها طويلا
برحمتك
برحمتك يا أرحم
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
الراحمين.